I am Victor Dixon. I'm the new genealogy librarian here at the Schaumburg Township District Library, and I welcome you all here. Thank you for joining me today. And I mainly wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of all of the different resources that we have here at the library. And of course, the best way to go about that from my point of view is to start with the homepage, schaumburglibrary.org. When you go to e-library, you'll come down to where it says genealogy. And that'll take you to our genealogy databases. Now, I won't have enough time to go through all of these tonight. So I'll just be taking a look at a few of them, and we'll see some of the things that we can do with them. Now, one of the things I would like to encourage everyone to do here is to visit this page and just play around with some of these databases. They're capable of doing a lot. And sometimes one of the best ways to discover what they can do is just type in different searches, put in different search examples. And the nice thing about them is, while they're not exactly the same, there is something of a pattern to them. So you can follow the pattern to see, okay, if this worked on this database, this might work on this one as well. That doesn't always work, but on a number of occasions, it does function quite well. First one we're going to take a look at is Ancestry Library Edition. Now, this one can only be used while you are inside of the library. A nice thing about it is that you can watch the tutorial to see how to use American Library Edition. But I want to take you through a few things here right now so that you'll be aware of them. So go ahead and click into that. And again, there are a lot of options here, so we'll just be going over a few. We'll start with the begin search that's down here. Now, once we go in, generally speaking, the very first thing that I do is I choose show more options. And I think that's a good way to begin, simply because when you choose to show more options, you don't have to think about, well, what specific things should I put in? It just brings them all up for you. So we're going to be doing some searches here. And you'll be learning a little bit about my family here, since that was, I figured, a good way to learn about the databases and to show other people. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. And we have a technical difficulty. Okay, can everyone on Zoom see the screen right now that I'm looking at? It should say search at the very top. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure everyone can see it, whether you're following Zoom or you're in the room, which apparently it wasn't doing. Okay, so we'll start with our first search. So type in William Dixon. Now, you may notice that there's an option to choose exact. And you want to be careful with that. I would not suggest using exact when you first start a search, because sometimes people's names may be in resources in different ways. For example, I just typed in William Dixon. Is his name always spelled that way? Not necessarily. So I do suggest whenever you're starting a search, I wouldn't start off by using exact. So now we'll say birth year, 1876. Location, Ohio. And then it automatically brings up some options for Ohio. So we'll say Ohio, USA. Then for spouse, we'll type in Nettie. Notice I did not put in a last name. There is a reason for that. Child, Albert. And we'll say gender, male. So now we'll perform a search. And as you can see, there's a lot of different forms of information that we can look for. These sliders allow you to say whether I'm looking only for someone with their name spelled exactly that way, whether they're going to be born in 1876, or maybe they were born in 1877. And that's one of the reasons why you won't necessarily use exact, because you might get different results. All of these results here are not necessarily for the person that I'm looking for. In fact, I can guarantee you they aren't. So you want to put in some good search terms, but again, start small. And as you get too many results, then you add in more and more information until you get what you're looking for. Now, one of the ways you can also see what results that you just earned, you can hover over these and they'll show you a preview of what you're going to go into. Now, one of the interesting things you also want to be careful of is when you're doing a search in Ancestry, one of the things that I didn't put in was race and nationality. The reason for this is because it changes over the years. A person might be called one thing during one decade, and then you're something else the following decade. So I didn't start with that, and I'll be showing you why. So let's take a look at the first one. So it gives a pretty good amount of information. And you can also see, I see, yes, these are all relatives of mine. I know all of these people. So I do realize that this is one of my ancestors. So now let's say if you want to send this to yourself, you can hit send document. Then you would put your email address in twice and then send email. What it does is it sends you an email to a link, and then you'll click on the link, and then you'll either be able to save that to a flash drive. I am very thrilled with flash drives, or you could print it out at home. So these are some options that you can use. The first thing that we're going to do is take a look at some of these definitions that you see. So before I mentioned race varies from time to time. So for race, he's listed as mulatto. That's not a term I really use for myself, but it would have been probably a more popular term in 1876, which is when he was born. Now we'll take a look at what might happen if you do certain exact searches. His wife was often called Nettie Scott. We're going to choose exact for that. When you do that, the results end up changing a bit. And the reason why is because we use an exact. Now, if we take it off of exact, we can also just hit that and say spouse, Nettie. That goes along with showing there are multiple options for using this database. Then we take a look at the 1910 census record. You'll notice that she's listed as Nettie Dixon. So that's an example of why using an exact search can be tricky. because the person might be in the record, but it might not recognize them because it's using a different way of recognizing them. So now we have a picture here of the record. We're going to go into that. There are a number of options that we can do here. You can use the slider to zoom in and out. I personally prefer using the wheel on the mouse. And in this situation, they've highlighted it for us, which is very convenient, but be aware that it might not always do that when you do a search. So here we have William Dixon, the family members in Ohio, and some basic information they were taking for that specific census at that time. Not every census is going to be the exact same way. Over here on the right-hand side, it gives some of the sources for where I got this information, so that if by any chance you want to see the actual copy, which might be possible, you are capable of doing that. Once again, we have a save option, which gives us two different options. Send image home. If you choose that, once again, you can email it to yourself, and that email will then send you a link where you can take a look at what you were looking at before. Or the second one is save to this computer. If you use that, then it will save it to where your downloads are on your computer. And once again, I like using flash drives. You could also, if you have a CD burner still, you could use that. So there are a number of different ways in which you could save it, or you could have it saved to your downloads and then just print it out. And I should probably add, printing out your finds is a good idea because websites don't last forever. An example of that is I was reading an ebook with one of our e-resources, and I took notes for the ebook on the database that offered that ebook. And when I did that, I thought I was safe, but then the database that kept that ebook decided that they didn't want it anymore. And not only did I lose the book, but I lost all the notes that went with it. So that's something to keep in mind. If you find a lot of information, it's good to save it somewhere. And it's also good to print it out just in case the places where you saved it might not be there forever. So that is something that you'll want to keep in mind. You should be able to open the link. Someone asked if you use the send email option. You should be able to open the link at home. I have not heard differently. Of course, databases sometimes change their features. But yes, you should be able to open what you have sent at home. You just want to be able to search the database from home. Okay, and you'll notice me looking in different directions because I have someone here. I have a person that was watching from the doorway. And I have some pretty complicated notes because this is something that initially is complicated, but you get used to it. Okay. So now on the right-hand side, it has some other suggested records. So we're going to take a look at the 1920 census. First, here's an example of what I was talking of. What you might consider yourself to be may change over the years. Before, at the previous record, he was listed as mulatto. Now, in 1920, he's listed as Black. So that is something that has changed. We'll take a look at the 1930 census records. And once again, we see a change that has taken place. So these are things that you want to keep in mind while you're searching. Okay, now there are a couple of things that you may find useful while studying genealogy. Sometimes you'll go to look for a specific person and you won't find that person or any information about them. or not much information about them. One of the things that you can sometimes do is when you scroll down, you'll notice that there are links that you can click on for the household members. And when you use that, you can sometimes learn something about one person, and that person that you were looking for may be mentioned in their record. So that's another way that you can go about learning about someone. Sometimes when you're searching, it will show neighbors. And if you learn something about one of the neighbors, such as they were in this town, the same town in Ohio, and something fascinating happened in the town, and they might have been interviewed in a newspaper, and knowing that your relative and this neighbor both live in the same town, that can help you learn about the town. So those are little tricks that you can use while studying genealogy. So now we're going to take a look at his son, Albert Dixon. So we're moving up. He was born approximately 1903. And here you have some more information about him, such as his World War II draft card. Now, these are really useful because they can tell you a lot more about them, such as them being born September 14th, 1902. Once again, this is the reason why you don't want to look up someone's record and say, well, found the person, I'm done. You want to keep looking, especially if you can find documents from that time period. We can also have a lot of fun with pictures. So here we have the U.S. school yearbooks, 1900 to 2016. Click on the picture. We can actually get the actual page from the yearbook. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see there are other pages of the yearbook that you can look at. You can also zoom in. Once again, we have sliders here, but I prefer using the mouse wheel. So there we have Albert Dixon, graduated February 1922, I should say. Enters Ohio State University. And here's his quote, "A manly man who counts his friends by all who know him." And once again, we have the option to save this and send it to ourselves. So now we're going to try something new. We're going to go home. We're going to do a search. Automatically, I go to show more options. It says show fewer options because I opened up the show more options. So it's going to say to do something different. So in case you're wondering, why does it say show fewer options now? Because I clicked it from before. So now we're going to look for Albert Dixon. This time we are going to say exact. Birth year, we're going to use the 1902 option. Location, Ohio. And so we're going to choose exact for a lot of these. Gender, male. So now, we don't have a lot of results because I used exact. And we're going to take a look at, we already looked at the draft card, so now we're going to take a look at this. Ohio, United States Birth and Christenings Index, 1774 to 1973. So that's another thing you can look for on these records. But the primary thing that I found interesting here, father, it sort of says William Dixon, but it only says WM. That's another reason why you don't necessarily want to do an exact search, because if someone's just taking notes down on this person had this done on this day, they might not write out the entire name. They might think, oh, well, everyone knows William Dixon, so I'll just put WM period, and they'll be able to figure that out. So that's something you want to be careful of. And once again, it's a link. You can go to it. You don't have a whole lot of information for it over here, but it is something to be aware of while you're doing searches. Okay, so now we're going to try something new. So we were using begin searching that's located down here. Now we're going to go to the top where it says search. We're going to choose card catalog. On the right-hand side, notice that it says new on several occasions. These are new records that are being added. The number one thing you probably want to take away from that is the fact that there are consistently new things being added to genealogical records. Ideally, if you're a genealogist, your work is never done because there's always new things being discovered, new things being added, so on and so forth. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Now, right now, we've got a listing. I'll move that over there a bit. We have a listing of 11,222 records. You probably don't want to go through all of those. So once again, we have filters over here. We have different continents. I'm just going to say North America. You can also lower down the year. So maybe I just want to look in the 1900s. Now you'll still see some that will be of a different time period. That's just the way sometimes records work, but you'll find a good number of them like this one, 1900 to 2023. So it helps lower it a bit. And then, of course, on the left-hand side, you can always lower it down to maybe just looking for military records, newspapers, periodicals, because they might have, again, like I said before, they might have been featured in the newspaper, or they might have had a business that was mentioned in the newspaper. So those are different things that you can take a look at. So I do not want to spend the entire evening discussing just one resource. So now we're going to take a look at FamilySearch. I'm going to make an adjustment here. Yeah. Now you can access FamilySearch by going through where we went through before. You click on the F, it takes you straight down to FamilySearch. The reason why I want to make sure I already had FamilySearch open is because with FamilySearch, you do have to create your own account. The account is free, but it's a way to build family trees, which you can do in FamilySearch. So FamilySearch is maintained by the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints. And again, it's free. There are some things that are in FamilySearch that are for in the library only. So you can only use it while you're in the library for some things. There are a lot of things on FamilySearch you can actually do while you're at home. And it'll let you know when you reach that point. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at search, records. And as I said before, I always automatically just go to more options. It's just easier just to go straight to that. So now we're going to do another search. So we'll say Mel. Albert Dixon. Birth, we're going to use the 1902 year that we saw from the previous search, which is why searching multiple databases is useful. Ohio, United States. And a fascinating thing that I noticed while using this is for some reason, a lot of people share the names of different relatives and me on the British Isles, So for country and location, I'm going to choose United States. So now, again, not everything that pops up, not all 3,384 records are specifically the person that I'm looking for. And one of the ways that I know that is on the right-hand side where it says relationships. Albert Dixon and Minnie Saunders, those aren't relatives of mine, but Nanny Scott is, as we saw on a previous record. So we're going to go into this one. Okay, so now one of the things that's interesting about this is the edit button, but I'll get to that shortly. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the image. Now, you might notice that nothing is highlighted here. So do not become over dependent on highlighting or expect every database is going to do that. Sometimes you do have to look through the record. On the bright side, it did take us to the right page because as you can see at the bottom, there are a lot of other different pages. These are different ways you can set up the screen. I'm not too partial about view grid. I'm not too partial about split screen. It's kind of already split at the bottom. Some people like that though, and if you do, hey, have fun with it. The arrow pointing down, that's if I want to download the record. This is for changing the brightness and contrast. As you can see, that can sometimes make the record easier to read, depending on how well it's displayed when it shows up. Not every record is going to come up perfect. So sometimes you will have to make some adjustments to be able to see it. And then we have the plus or minus. Once again, you can use that for zoom. And as always, I prefer using the mouse wheel. So I'm going to go in, we're looking at the exact record. Albert Dixon's there, born 1902. The reason why it has all of those is because it's like all of these folks, it's Chillicothe. If it's something that's being repeated, they'll just mark that. Now, one of the things you might notice is this is all done in the same handwriting. So someone's actually sitting there writing all of this down. And since they're sitting there writing all of this down, they might take some shortcuts such as, once again, W.M. Dixon. He didn't fill out writing out William. He just wrote WN. And that's also how records can sometimes show up in other places differently because that's how they were actually written into the record. So that's another thing that you want to keep in mind. Okay, so I mentioned before that this information can be edited. Now, the bright side about that is if you see a mistake, then you can go in and make some changes to it. The downside is if one of your other relatives is also looking at this record, they can also make changes to it, and they might put something that's inaccurate into it, which you probably prefer them not to do, but that is a reality of using this search. So, in order to take a look at that more closely, I'm going to do a new search here. Search records. Automatically more options. Mel. Walter Dixon. For birth, we're going to put 1929 and 1930. Birthplace, Chicago, and I'll explain in a moment why I put 2 years down there for the, as you notice, it says birth range. So we'll scroll down. Let's say Father Albert Dixon. And once again, we're going to say United States. Now notice there is a show exact search option. You can use that on this record as well. I generally prefer not to use exacts unless I definitely know exactly what I'm looking for. So we'll say search. Okay, so Walter Dixon, once again, 306 records. Not all of them are the person I'm looking for, but Albert C. Dixon, yeah, we'll go with that. So now we have a picture here. We're going to go into that. And as we zoom in on it, there's my grandfather's writing. This is a certificate of correction. So as you can see, he was born on December 9th, 1929. However, this was turned in and stamped January 27th, 1930. So right here, we have December 9th, 1929. Down here, event date, January 27th, 1930. So that's something that you'll want to be aware of once again while searching for records. Yes, they might have been born 1929, but if the record's from 1930, it might have a different year on it. Now, the interesting thing about Walter Dixon is that nobody called him that. I don't think I knew his name was Walter Dixon until I was in junior high. I had always called him Uncle Pete. Everybody called him Pete. So now we have a fair amount of information in here to identify him, but what if we wanted to add that in? We could go to edit. Then we're going to take a look at essential information, which is where his birth name is. We can go to add name. So once we go to add name, we're going to choose the type. We'll just leave it with birth name and you'll see why. So we're going to go to add remove fields. We'll choose given name for this example, save fields. Given name, Pete Dixon. Save changes. So now we're going to go back. Walter Dixon's over here. You also have Pete Dixon here. And that's a way you can make certain updates. You can also add additional names. There's a lot that I could say about that complicated process that I don't necessarily want to go into right now. But those are ways that you can also edit records. And as you can see, principal name is still Walter Dixon. But you can also throw Pete Dixon in there to help people that are looking for records to know that that's one of the options that's there. Now, there are edits that you can use using the pencil. What you want to be certain of is that you never go to the very bottom and say delete whatever name. So if you hit delete Walter, it's not going to delete Walter and just leave Pete Dixon there. It's going to delete Walter completely. So you don't want to do that. There's a way to bring it back, but it's kind of a complicated process. You wouldn't want to have to go through that. So that's just something that I want to warn you about. One of the things that's very, very important with genealogy that you definitely want to make sure of is be honest. When you start studying your family's history, you are going to discover some things that you didn't want to know. You're going to discover some things that are not as great as you may have wanted them to be. But you want to be honest, include it. It's what happened. Okay. So now we're going to try something else that's really neat about this site. Family tree. And as you see, this site allows you to start building a family tree on it. Now, on the right-hand side, we don't have to look at it in this portrait fashion. We can change it to landscape if you prefer to do that. A very fun one, from my point of view, is fan chart. Now, on the one hand, this is really nice because it looks really cool. It's not always the easiest thing to follow, but it does look really nice. I will say that. Once again, we have this little icon here. We can add in some things. Home, we're already home. So now you did notice that it changed a little bit there. Let's say I'm here, I don't know where I am, home. Okay, well, did more for fan chart than that. But anyway, this is a way you can get back to the beginning. This is your full screen. That just sets it back to the way it originally was. So those are some things that are very nice. And remember, as I said before, when you're taking a look at these different options, we have the print option. Printing is good because I can't guarantee you that this site will necessarily be around forever. So it is good to print your items. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at the last one I'm going to go over this evening, which is HeritageQuest. Once again, a nice thing about HeritageQuest is there is a watch the tutorial right there. So you can take a look at that. Now, when you go into HeritageQuest, one of the things that you notice is that HeritageQuest is a lot more specific with what you're looking for. So if you begin a search here, it's not searching everything automatically. You have census, military records, you can see it on your screen. There are a lot of things that you can go into directly. Now, right here in the center, says research aids. So this has some suggestions on what you might want to do while doing research on HeritageQuest. That can be very useful. So now we're going to take a look in the census records. And one of the nice things about HeritageQuest is it goes straight to the complicated search, so we don't have to collect anything that's additional. Match all terms exactly, not right now, but that is an option. So let's say Albert Dixon. Birth year, 1902. Location, Ohio. I like this lived-in option. And we'll go with, this time we'll go with child. Gender male. So I'll go ahead and do a search for that. Now, one of the very interesting things about this is that right now we're taking a look at some of the results that we're using for the census. We see 1950, 1940, 1930, then 1950 again. then 3030, then 1910. Nice option. It's up here, browse by collection. We're going to switch that on. Now we just have it, stuff from the 50s, 1910s, 30s, 40s. So that's a way to make it a little bit easier on yourself. So now we're going to take a look at 1950. Once again, Albert Dixon, birth date about 1903. Is that wrong? Technically speaking, no. 1902, 1903, they're pretty close. So if it says about 1903, that's not necessarily a mistake. It's better when it's more specific, but not necessarily a mistake. But we see Albert Dixon, Chicago, relatives at Winna, Walter, that's accurate. So now we're going to view the record. Again, it gives us the preview. Once again, you recognize this send document. Like I said, as you start to go through the databases, you start to notice that more and more of the databases follow certain patterns, and that aids you in discovering how to find this and how to find that. So we want to go into the record. Yes, there is more to discover. Once again, this one is highlighted, so that makes things easier. See Albert Dixon, number of the relatives, scanning, scanning, scanning. Notice the birth date isn't even placed here. So the 1903 is based on something else that might have been in the record. But this specific record that we're taking a look at, it doesn't show it. Once again, when we're taking a look at race continually changes. It's not mulatto, now it's Negro and Black. And I suspect if someone looked me up, they will probably get something else. And once again, as we scroll down, we see more relatives coming because now we're in the 1950s. Now, since it is the month of February, there is something that I wanted to point out here. When you begin searching, you can find the Freedmen's Bank here. This is one of the ways of researching. The reason why that's important is because if you're an African American, you're looking up your family history, your ancestors might not have been included in birth records or certain censuses before a certain time period. This will sometimes find those records for you. And if you want to read more about that, as you scroll down, it has the description of what it's there for. You also have this link that explains how you can research African American history if that's what you're researching. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, as you scroll down, there's a bibliography that talks more about it. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. And essentially, those are the ones that I'm planning on going over tonight. So if you have any questions, go ahead and mention them now. And if you're online, mention them in chat. So any questions?
Oh, no, not right now. No.
Okay. And remember, I do work here. I'll be around in the library. So if you think of something later, you can email the reference department. I work here 5 days a week. If you come into the library having problems with the database, a lot of times I'm here to help. If I'm not, there is someone from the reference department that also can help you. Thank you very much, Renee. And I do plan on doing some more presentations of this nature. And I do hope to see you at the library. Yes, you can search other countries. Now, it does depend on which database you're using. And then there are some searches that you might want to take a look at for, like, if you're trying to find out, okay, the person lived in this country before, but I'm having difficulty finding those resources. When that occurs, then you definitely want to take a look at some of the resources in that country, because those do exist. There are a lot of countries that say, oh, you're looking for a relative, we have this option here. So that is something that you're able to do. And before I end completely, I just want to go down. If you don't find it on any of these databases, you may also want to take a look at birth certificates, birth announcements, which a birth announcement is very good to finding a maiden name, wedding invitations and announcements, divorce records, state death index, cemeteries, vital records of the town where they once lived, newspaper articles. Once again, it's not just a matter of obituaries, but you can also look up to see, you know, did they own a business? Were they interviewed once? Books or writings about the town from where they came from. Your ancestors may be mentioned in it. Town directories, churches, synagogues, temples, and mosques. A lot of those keep records for baptisms, presentations, first communion, bar mitzvahs, memberships, names on the building. I have one in Oak Park, in case you're wondering about that. Newsletters, family Bibles, Torahs, Qurans, Vedas, and so on. Did they keep a diary or a journal? Letters, wills and deeds, photographs. And if you look at a photograph, you're wondering for what time period that photograph is from, we do have resources here that talk about different fashions and styles through the ages. So that can sometimes help you. Hospitals keep medical records for decades. If you're a loved one, you might be able to learn a lot of things from that. Courthouses, military records, census records, and again, beware, they might have differently spelled names there. My family does sometimes spell its last name in different ways. And for those of you that are very old-fashioned, we do have a microfilm machine here at the library. So those are some other things to take a look at. Our next big presentation on genealogy is going to be on Tuesday, March 19th from 6:30 to 7:30 in the workshop room where I am right now. This will be a hybrid program, so it will be shown over the internet. And this will be Truth or Fiction, Unraveling a Family Yarn. Something that you should be aware of is that family stories are not always very accurate. So you might want to take a look at certain things that happen. Okay, so that's everything, and I'll see you at another time.